This is Todd Tritchler, and my guest is MarkHoxey, who recently was selected as a finalist in the database design category for the Oracle Database Developer Choice Awards. So congratulations, Mark. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So, Mark, I was looking at your profile, and you were quoted as, "I strongly believe that a well-constructed database is the foundation upon which a well-constructed application is based."
Yes.
So,
words that may come back and bite me, I suspect.
So I actually think you're probably right on that. Do you have any good examples of why a well-constructed database is the foundation upon a well-constructed application, or counter-examples of where somebody didn't pay attention to their well-constructed database and failed miserably?
Yes, I suppose as a generic observation, yeah, I was contracting an Oracle database, excuse me, an Oracle database developer for a dozen years or more, just on a sort of contract basis. And I moved around, between various organizations, various projects in that time. And so doing some development work, doing some support type work. And I always found that anytime one had taken a shortcut in terms of the database design, they prematurely denormalized or something along these lines, then it came back to bite them, or rather, it came back to bite me.
Okay.
I would be the poor person that had to come in after the fact to try and clean it up. Yes, so certainly, in that regard, my experience has certainly shown that, taking that upfront approach and doing some design upfront, and this is what I've done as well when I've come in on a greenfield system. I've worked on, for example, a couple of bank lending systems, greenfields, and the first thing I've done after I've gone through some pages of requirements, the various requirements documents, so I'll sit down and I'll try and nut out a data model, because I know I'm going to have to build a database that implements this, and in doing so, I find I can come up with a design. I look at the design and I can take the requirements and I can look at my design and say, well, does this design, can it satisfy the requirements?
Yeah.
And likewise, I can then take the design and I can look at it back to the requirements and I can start asking questions. So I can take those questions back to the business and say, hey, how about this scenario? What would happen here? How do you foresee this? So in the same way that, it's like a two-way flow.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, and this I find very, very, very beneficial in the early stages of doing sort of system development. You're still really working out the requirements.
How often do you find that the customer actually doesn't really know their own requirements yet?
It's probably more of an exploration for both parties. So, the analysts and the customers, they've got a sort of an idea of what they want, but let's face it, they're not technical people. So, they've got gaps in their knowledge. Clearly, I'm not a business person. I'm going to have gaps in my knowledge. And it's more of, the two parties coming together and working through those gaps. So, yeah, I these days, I say these days, things are still that way. But, yeah, I don't, people sort of jump in first. It's all agile these days. Hey, we don't do design sort of thing. We just get in there and start cutting code. Okay, that's fine. But, you still have to have that requirement. You start to have an understanding of the requirements. So, the data model in many ways is part requirements, part actual design. So it kind of fits in there in that gap. And yeah, I would always recommend that somebody sit down, get hold of do a database design, have it there when you're actually doing your coding, be it just on the screen, be it print it out.
Yeah.
I love printing them out because I can just annotate them,
Yeah.
I'll take it into a meeting, and so when people start talking about stuff, I'm there looking at the model and start saying,
like,
when they
that requirement isn't met. Here we go.
Exactly. So, and in doing so, you can stop sort of problems. Well, hopefully you can stop some major problems before they become major. There's nothing worse than sort of getting partway down and realizing you've made a fundamental flaw in your database design, because the refactoring, as we call it now, in other words, the rewriting to correct that can be quite severe. It affects sort of quite a lot of the application.
Now, just out of a matter of interest, would you consider yourself more of a DBA or a database designer and developer?
Database designer, developer. My current role is development DBA. That's simply because I'm the guy that knows more about the database than any of the other developers.
Okay.
And that's how it goes. Yes.
So you've got a unique perspective then in terms of, I often hear this, I'll be at a conference and you'll have the developer whining about the DBA isn't giving us the access we need to get the job done. And then you'll hear the DBA say, you wouldn't believe what this idiot developer wrote in his SQL statement. Do you have any stories about that, or in terms of either interesting just because they're funny to laugh at, or how to avoid and getting those two camps working together so that you actually have a good result at the end of it?
Yeah. I think it's funny because it's true. I don't think I've worked in an organization where that kind of interaction, that sort of complaint from both sides has never occurred, actually. Yes. In my current workplace, I'm the gatekeeper. We let the developers do what they want in the development environment, but once it hits test, I'm the gatekeeper sort of thing.
So you have to be the bad guy occasionally.
I'm the guy that's that's stopping everything. That's the bottleneck. I do take it back to them and exactly that, and say, hey, what are you doing here? Or you've asked me to deploy this. Do you realize the consequences of this? And I'm not sort of vetting their code. I don't have a list of standards and sort of like, I give them a D- because, they didn't get their indenting correct or anything along those lines. It's more of, I suppose I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective than they are. I only get so many chances, I guess, to do a deployment. Whereas with an application, we can just keep recompiling the code, just keep recompiling, deploying, forever and a day until we get it right. With the database, when we go into a sort of production system with a deployment, we have to get it right pretty much first time, because we could be, modifying data, back populating stuff. If we get it wrong, well, for a start, I know who's going to be sorting that out, and it's not going to be the developer.
Yeah.
But likewise, we could have a serious outage on our hands if we've corrupted data or something. It's not like we can just, let's go get the previous version and put it back in, and sort out the mess later.
Now, aren't there, there's features in the database that if they're applied, then like flashback queries and edition-based redefinition, can't some of those features mitigate some of that somewhat?
certainly can. We've looked, my current workplace, we've thought about edition-based redefinition. To date, we haven't actually acted on it, partly, well, for two main reasons. Because I'm a bit of a gatekeeper, we can get around some of the, I've got that, I guess, holistic view, or I try to keep that what's going on. So we're not doing large numbers of deployments whereby we will need, you know, a number of different versions.
Okay.
It would have been useful on occasion, but on the other side of on the flip side, the edition-based redefinition, obviously, once you start versioning your code and it's there live in the database, well, you have to start keeping track of what versions you've got, what they're doing, and the differences, and so forth. It can be, on occasion, it can be hard enough just keeping our source control correct, let alone having those versions in actual, you know, running live in the system.
Yeah.
We do take steps. For example, in my current workplace, where we do try and be online 24/7, you know, we are an online organization. We, you know, take transactions over the web through mobile devices and so forth.
So we take downtime is a real cost. Then your 24/7 shop, if you're down, then it's real money that's going out the door.
Yes, that's right. You know, we have quiet periods, but we certainly keep the downtime to a minimum. And so, you know, maybe once a month or something along those lines. We take steps so that we can actually modify our code live in production without needing an outage. Obviously, like I said, we haven't done the edition-based redefinition, but we do things like eliminate package state.
Okay.
So, you know, we do make extensive use of PLSQL in the system. And so, yes, the elimination of package state allows us to, so long as interfaces don't change, we can deploy new versions of the code without any downtime, you know, and the system's up and running.
And since you're the gatekeeper, that actually works.
Quite right. And again, that comes back to the vetting the changes and, you know, being very careful about them as you put them into the sort of test systems. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, I like to take that active part in doing those deployments, because I'm looking at it in terms of, right, this is a trial of what's going to happen when we go into production. Yeah, it took me a while to get used to this, certainly. And even now, you know, I go in, I will have double check the code that we're doing, you know, we're deploying, you know, I've got a backup ready to go, sort of, if anything does go wrong. I do a simple sort of comparison of the code to make sure that what we're actually going to deploy is what I think we're going to deploy, and, you know, what our deployment plan says we're going to deploy. You know, it's the dotting of I's and the crossing of T's, that sort of stuff. Yeah, and we're quite successful in that so far.
Well, that's good. Yeah. You must be doing your job well then.
Well, from my perspective, you know, you're only there's always the next time, you know, is always the one that's going to bite you. You know, you'll say these things and then you'll forget that one check. And that'll be the one that, you know, goes wrong.
Absolutely. So how did you get here? I mean, how did you get started in technology? How did you get into Oracle? What was the path?
Okay, to answer that, I'm going to have to take you back in time, you know, way back in time to the early 90s, where the internet really, certainly as we know it today, just didn't exist. So, yeah. Back then, so yeah, we're very early 90s. I was a graduate out of university, had a science degree, and like all sort of young people, I decided that I wanted to do something different. So instead of sort of pursuing a pure sort of science, I decided I wanted to get into computer science. So I went back to university to do a computer science degree. And to support myself while I did that, I actually took a job with one of the universities here in Perth in their
Okay.
sort of statistical, it was their sort of, they called it the stats office, but we didn't do much in the way of statistics, not true statistical analysis, really. It was just sort of management information or
Yeah.
business intelligence.
Keeping track of all the students and what courses they were doing. And
quite right. I mean, you got to understand that back then, excuse me, back then, you know, there was no web. So you think about information delivery. I was there, basically. I would take phone calls from people or emails. Emails are, you know, that was new. So
it was
emails
a killer app just recently burgeoning onto the...
Quite right, yes. So, you know, and people will be asking questions, you know, how many people are doing this? What can we expect for this? And so there I was. I was a guy who had access and, you know, to various computer systems there at the university, and I knew how to use a spreadsheet. So, you know, spreadsheets were yeah, that was the thing for getting information out.
What was it, SuperCalc?
I think it was, you know, it was Lotus 123 was the sort of...
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Then along came Windows and Excel took over. So
there was another one back in that time frame.
Yep. Yeah, and that was it, sort of thing. So I started off doing that. Then sort of mid-90s, well...
so that was basically a job at the university where you were actually studying at?
No, I was studying at a different university.
Oh, okay.
And so a few days a week, I would sort of, you know, finish work and I would drive over to the other university to do their evening classes. You know, weekends we're doing assignments and things like that. To be honest, I really enjoyed all this time. I wasn't married, obviously. You know, I had time on my hands. So yeah, you know, time progressed a few years. The web came along. Now for me, that sort of had the possibility to address the delivery mechanism. You know, there I am, I'm doing sort of spreadsheets and stuff, and I'm emailing them to people, and then I'm getting, and I'm getting the phone calls. How do I open that attachment? You know, oh, I'm on a Macintosh, not a PC. I don't have Excel. And so, you know, that sort of stuff. So the web, you know, the table tags, you know, they came along and suddenly it was like, ooh, you know, possibilities, CGI, you know, that let you sort of interface, have a form interfacing down to a database. You know, so, you know,
the original web-based database-backed web applications.
Yep, that's right. I can, you know, that had a lot of potential for me. So, you know, I remember setting up a little web server on a sort of PC, spare PC we had in the office and getting started that way. You know, as far as Oracle goes, the university standardized on various systems, but they all had Oracle at the back end. So that's how, you know, I came into the Oracle world. Mm-hmm. You know, went on some training, started learning the Oracle way of, you know, a bit of PLSQL, you know, Oracle SQL, this sort of stuff.
They kept on asking you questions that you needed to go to the database for, huh?
That's right. That's right. And, you know, I moved into sort of data warehousing from there. You know, I'm sort of like, well, I've got all this information at my disposal. I've got all these questions. What can I do now to kind of bring it all together? So the university set up a bit of a role and, you know, just to start to do what you know, what is now sort of data warehousing. So, you know, and that's where it all really started for me. And it's always been about and I guess it's been about the information delivery. You know, the people in the organizations, or these days, wherever they happen to be, they've got questions. You know, there's a vast amount of information in the systems that we have. And it's all about taking, you know, matching the two together. So their questions, there's the data, you know, work it all out. I like databases simply because it's the data side of things. It's the answering the questions.
Yeah. Now, when you're answering those questions, what are some of your favorite tools that you've used over the years that you particularly like or find useful? And
okay. These days, my main tool I'm using for work is going to be Oracle SQL Developer. If you are a Oracle developer, as in if you're doing any sort of development work in the Oracle database, that's your sort of obvious tool of choice. It's got pretty much everything you might want in there. So, it's got debugging support, source control. It's got a unit tester module. It's got support for sort of DBA activities and everything. And you know something? It's free. You can go onto the Oracle website and just download it and start using it for free. I mean, can you get any from that, really?
Over 4 million users can't be all wrong.
Quite right. Yes. So the other thing, it comes with a built-in data modeler.
I'm particularly interested about that from you. Database design is important. Data modeling is important. Did you ever use Designer?
I did. Yes. I grew up.
I've never met a more hardcore, rabid, loyal fan base than the Designer users. How does it match up now to that? The Designer modeling now are you getting to the point now where you're like, okay, this is really here, or are you still like hankering back to in the good old days we had Designer?
No, I will definitely say that the data modeler that's built in on SQL Developer is better, no doubt about it. Oh. Obviously, it's up to date with all the latest and greatest features. So I don't think I've found any feature when taking my model, working it down to getting it to generate the DDL. I don't think I've found any feature of that it is unable to actually generate.
Oh wow!
So that's really a good thing. I mean, I'm talking about I'll do things like create tables that maybe they're sort of like maybe indexed, organized, and partitioned, and all this sort of stuff. So it's got all the sort of features that you need to actually get some DDL that you can sort of just take and run. It's fairly straightforward to use. The diagramming, it is good. Diagramming is always one of those things, and even with Designer, it was always generating a diagram, getting those lines all over the place. So all the relationships, they're the ones. Now I've got a sort of mechanism. I'll try and sort of my general philosophy there is, well, I'll try and move things around so that there's the least overlap of lines.
Okay.
So,
that's nice and pretty, a little bit more readable.
Yes. But everything's there. You color coding, that sort of stuff. Small things, actually. Like I was saying, I said just color coding. Well, I will try to do a couple of colors depending on the type of table. So a table that is a reference table, I will put in a sort of one particular shade. A table that's sort of a high transaction table would be in a different type of shade. So when I print it out, I can sort of, it just aids that sort of that visibility. The mind, the how you picture it in your mind. But yes, SQL data modeler. I've got, it's firmly in favor of it. And probably, something that maybe a lot of people don't realize, it can be used on other database platforms as well. It's not just limited to Oracle.
Yeah.
You already know my opinion about doing data models. there it is in the tool. You can just
you can't have a well-constructed database unless you have a good data model. Is that about right?
Quite right. Quite right.
Well, that's the heart of database design, really, is a decent data model, I assume. Database 12c, I mean, you mentioned how SQL Developer, the data modeler, it's able to design and model down and gets the latest features. They keep up with it. What are some of your favorite features, or what's your favorite feature in Database 12c?
I guess if I had to pick a single feature, the one that I like most of all is actually Flashback Data Archive. Now, not strictly speaking, not a new in 12c, but in 12c they changed it so that it didn't require, I think it was the advanced compression license. So it's now accessible to anybody. Now,
same technology but different packaging, basically.
Yes, there were some improvements in 12c with regard to this. Now, Flashback Data Archive, in case anybody doesn't know, it's basically a way of being able to tell or ask Oracle, what did my data look like, at a previous point in time. Now we've had Flashback query for quite some time, I think all the way back to Oracle 9 days.
Yeah.
But this goes beyond that. What Oracle is doing behind the scenes for you is essentially keeping track of all the changes that you make to your tables. Or the way you set it up is you essentially put a retention policy on a table, and Oracle will keep track of all tables going back, or changes to that table going back that far. So, if you set it up to be, let's say, a year, Oracle will keep track of all the changes you make, and you can query that table, and basically ask Oracle, show me what it looked like 6 months ago, and Oracle will come back with that answer. We can achieve this kind of thing via triggers and all sorts of stuff, trying to change our underlying data model, put sort of effective start and end dates and so forth. But here we've got Oracle doing it all for you. It's not Oracle storing it out of the main table in a sort of separate table, all this history essentially. You don't have to change your application to actually make use of this. This is very powerful. It's being tracked for you as a background sort of process. So there's no triggers. Oracle isn't creating triggers for you on the table or anything like this, which can impact performance or something like that. So it's transparently doing all this for you. Minimal overhead involved. So, again, harking back to some experience that I've had, we get through the sort of development phase and we're nearing production, and the users will suddenly say, I want to know what's going on, sort of like what changes are being made, so what they're asking for is, can you give me history on this data? And, we're way down the development path. And so, changing the data model, trying to introduce history into a table which was never designed for it. Maybe it's a third-party application or something. You don't have control of the source. It can be a real problem. But Flashback Data Archives kind of just magically takes care of all this for you.
Nice.
Getting access to the history is a matter of querying the base table and utilizing the sort of flashback extensions, flashback queries, saying, as of a timestamp, show me what it looked like. And Oracle just takes care of working out where that data is. That's brilliant. Yes, my favorite feature by far.
Mainly because you don't have to do all that plumbing to get it working around yourself. Oracle does it for you.
Quite right, yes.
Any new cool technologies that you're playing with that maybe you're not using in a production situation, but you just piques your interest?
Probably the top on my list is the Oracle REST data services, or ORDS, as tend to call it. A complaint that has been leveled by developers who, you know, like to complain, shall we say. It's probably the second largest complaint I've had, other than the sort of deployment side of things, is that it's hard to interact with the database. You know, there's APIs out there, but I guess it's that object relational mapping thing that, you know, lots of ways and means of trying to work around it. But really, you know, I guess that fundamentally it's developers saying, well, we've got all our stuff, but then, you know, we structure it how we want. You know, we've got our objects and everything's hunky-dory once we're up in object land. But once it comes time to interact with the database, we're writing a lot of code, you know, and it's translation type stuff. We're having to deal with, you know, the database structure rather than object structure.
Yeah.
And I can understand this. You know, you want to be able to do things, you know, relatively quickly. You don't want to be doing a lot of sort of translation type work, because clearly that's
counterproductive.
It's overhead. So if you're sort of in that position and your architecture is a sort of service-oriented sort of architecture, which, let's face it, you know, that's probably the way most modern systems are being developed these days. I think ORDS can really sort of can do a lot for you, because it allows you, you know, essentially you can expose the database through REST services. Now, and of course, you know, modern application tools can interact with the, you know, REST services fairly seamlessly. You know, it's just a natural way of doing things. I've started taking a bit of a look there. Haven't got anything sort of into production, but, you know, from a sort of, this is the way, you know, we'd like to go. I think there's a lot of promise there. And yeah, I would sort of suggest to, you know, anybody who's looking at trying to sort of start out doing some, you know, a new Oracle system or something like that. Well, if you think you can sort of be more productive, if interacting through the database using REST is going to be, you know, beneficial to you, you should really be looking hard at the Oracle REST data services and what they can do. They're very powerful. You know, there are, I guess there's other sorts of tools out there, other products that probably can do similar things, but the Oracle one, it's got the proper support for Oracle. So, you know, if you wanted to be invoking sort of PLSQL type, you know, stored procedures, that sort of stuff, it's all there. You don't have to compromise sort of any of your sort of design, anything that, any of the ways that you may have wanted to do in the past. You can take your, you know, existing stuff and sort of, put in a new interface. It becomes a new interface even onto existing sort of stuff that you've got there. Very powerful.
And it's accessible via your favorite tool, SQL Developer.
It is too. It is too. Oh, and I also believe it's free as well.
This is good
not a product that you're going to have to pay a license for.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that's great about it, I was chatting with Chris at one conference, Chris Rice, who's dev manager for his team builds out actually both SQL Dev and ORDS. They were saying that a lot of what his developers are doing and what they're building out is functionality that, because Oracle is using it in their public cloud. So if you are doing that online, and if you are wanting to expose, you know, to some of these new like REST enabled type services, it is a good solution. A lot of the features that they're putting into it is exactly that case use.
Yeah, that's right.
Mark, it's been awesome chatting with you, and love the Australian humor down there. Thanks again. Congratulations on being selected as a finalist. You not only were you nominated by the community, but you actually had to pass a panel of peers where I told those guys that, this is guys that knew database design, were, Oracle development guys and also Oracle ACE directors, and I said, I don't really care who wins, because eventually it's public voting, as long as we have a solid list of candidates. So that was kind of my one direction that I gave to the guys. I said, make sure that, they know what they're talking about, and that they have good tone in the community. When they're contributing back, they're not like, getting upset with somebody like, read the mail. So it was good to see how it worked out, and that, basically anybody that was selected as a finalist, you guys all did a really good job of contributing back. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you, Todd.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Todd. It's been a pleasure.